Good evening. This is Maestro Cretella with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today, we have a 1v1 on Paletooth Gorge. Our first player is none other than Maestro Cretella, playing as Sindri, Trollface, Chaos Sorcerer. This is a spell-casting and control and manipulation hero. He can shoot out long-range doom bolts, he can teleport, he can snare with Chains of Torment, as well as quite a few other things. My opponent is Fluffy Space Marine David, playing as the Dark Angels Force Commander with the toothbrushes on his helmet. This is a tanky melee hero who can disrupt things with Battlecry, as well as buff his own units with Battlecry, and he can punch vehicles and stuff. So I hadn't originally planned to cast this particular game, but lately there have been a few people asking for 1v1 replays, and lately it really has mostly just been 3v3, so I decided to go ahead and do it. There simply haven't been as many 1v1 replays to go around, and it's hard, even for the ones that are around, it's not as easy to get good 1v1 replays as it is to get good team game replays. But, well, here we are with one. This is a game that I played fairly shortly after finishing graduate school, so I'm a bit rusty here, and Fluffy Space Marine David is, I believe, a little bit rusty as well, since he's mostly been playing, I believe, Company of Heroes 2, and hasn't really been playing Dawn of War 2 for a while. But let's see. Fluffy Space Marine David's kind of an old bud of mine. I kind of taught him how to play Dawn of War 2 a little bit. He certainly did a lot of learning himself. And this matchup here we have right here, we have Space Marine. We have the Force Commander versus the Sorcerer. Now, this is traditionally considered very, very strongly in favor of the Force Commander. I don't really mind it as much as I used to. I think in part just because I've had quite a bit of practice actually playing it. And I mean, unfortunately, one of the disadvantages of playing the Sorcerer is that you, especially playing him in 1v1, you really do end up having to play a lot of disadvantageous matchups, since a lot of his disadvantaged matchups are heroes that tend to be rather common. There are always going to be Force Commander players and War Boss players and Lictor Alpha players, and those are some of the tough matchups that he has. Now, for this particular match, I'm going with the noisy build. I've got triple Heretics, one squad of Chaos Space Marines, and a Havoc. I really like this build. Now, the part of the reason behind the triple Heretics is just to cheaply put out a lot of units. This allows me to get more map control than if I were going for a shorter build with more expensive units. I can put a lot of Heretics out on the field. They're doing map control duty. Right now, well, aside from this idling Heretic squad, all of my Heretics were doing some kind of map control work. And it also gives me some cheap melee fighting potential. And typically I'm keeping, when I'm not having all of them on map control duty, I'm usually having 2 of them in combat and having one really, really just dedicated to map control. Now, part of the disadvantage of playing with Heretics, though, is that Scouts should be able to kite Heretics infinitely. So that's part of what David's doing. He's just running away from the Heretics. Part of what I'm doing is that I'm charging ahead anyway. Instead of running away, I'm charging ahead. Even though I shouldn't actually be able to catch up to the Heretics, as long as I charge forward, he needs to move back. He needs to move back until he can get some kind of additional support. And even if I may be losing a few models, I'll be keeping the map because of that. Now, ooh, and there we go with the combination of having a Havoc suppress unit and shooting it with Doom Bolts. David knows about that. He knows what's up, so he retreats them out of there to really minimize the damage they took from the Doom Bolts. And David is also very, very frequently using these garrisons to good effect, and that's of course just one of the. There are garrisons on this map, so he's making sure to use them. And that's really making it quite a bit harder for my Heretics to actually do things, and instead I'm bleeding models from it. So part of what I'm doing is I'm getting a grenade launcher upgrade. I'm typically not a huge fan of grenade launchers right now, just in Dawn of War 2. I prefer to keep my Heretics as melee. I find that that's generally more useful. But right now, David, he's continuously using the garrisons. So I really need to deal with it somehow. Otherwise, I'm actually just going to lose engagements when he uses the garrisons, and he's going to be able to control those parts of the map where there are garrisons. Now, I'm choosing to get grenade launchers because it's much cheaper than getting out a squad of noise marines. It's cheaper. It's both cheaper just in terms of the cost, and I also won't be taking up the population. It won't delay my tech as much, and I'm already going for this long Tier 1 build. And going for this particular Tier 1 build of 3 Heretics, the Chaos Space Marine, and the Havoc, that does mean my generators come down late. I think David's generators came down a bit late as well, though. Alright, now I tried to keep the Heretics in there and just reposition the Havoc under Worship, and it worked a little bit, but he was still able to get into melee with the Havoc and that, and I retreated it from there because it was just going to take damage from the Force Commander and was probably not going to get a chance to set up again. Meanwhile, I go for the Chaos Space Marines, and I managed to get another, the Tactical Marines, and I managed to get another model. Now, this is the noisy build, getting triple Heretics, a Chaos Space Marine, and the Havocs. One of the alternatives to this is the Tex build. The Tex build is the same thing, but with no Chaos Space Marine. 3 Heretics and a Havoc, no Chaos Space Marine. The advantages to the Tex build are that you can very quickly put down your generators, and then you have a very, very strong you have a very strong economy, because you get your generators down early, and you have a very low cost and low upkeep build. I like to go for the noisy build because the Tex build is a little bit more one-dimensional in dealing with the Force Commander. You rely entirely on the Havoc to control the Force Commander. With this build, I can both control the Force Commander as well as do some damage to him with the Chaos Space Marines, and it can be particularly effective if I actually manage to use them in combination with each other. Although the real reason I like to use the noisy build, well, just another reason, is that the Chaos Space Marines are good for dealing with the scouts. Now, normally without a Chaos Space Marine, scouts can, for the most part, run around with impunity because they would be able to kite Heretics infinitely, just run away infinitely because they have faster move speed. And I've been on the receiving end of some players who had very, very good scout micro, and it really meant that I really couldn't do much against the scouts, because they would just run away whenever the Heretics appeared, and I could never catch them. In particular, I would say I experienced that when playing Lucidich, who is a very good Force Commander player. Now, I'm maintaining my map control. I have a significant lead in VPs. Losing track of my Heretics right here. But we have about even power income, or even power generators. And I'm choosing to get a Dreadnought. Now, the Dreadnought is typically considered against a Force Commander a poor choice. I haven't seen David go for a Thunderhammer, so he can pretty easily upgrade to a Power Fist in response to a Dreadnought, and that's usually what Force Commander players do, so most of the times, players will pretty much not get walkers against the Force Commander in Tier 2. And in many cases, certainly for other races, there's generally a much better choice against the Force Commander than a walker. Especially something like Eldar, they would be way better off getting something like Warp Spiders instead of a Wraith Lord, because that would give them some extremely high range DPS to deal with the Force Commander, while also giving an AV Snare to deal with any vehicles that might come out on the field. In my case, the Dreadnought serves a lot of purposes. First of all, inevitably I'm going to need AV. And most of the sources of AV in Tier 2 for Chaos, the other sources of AV, Plague Marines, are durable, but not terribly powerful. A Lascannon Havoc is very powerful, but easy to force off. And then, with just the way the Chaos Army, with the the army compositions here, Space Marines are definitely the much better race for transitional AV. They just have more squads that can be upgraded to have some kind of AV weapon without sacrificing as much. Here, I really attempted to trap David. I wanted to move those 2 heretics into the retreat path, keeping up the pressure, and do a Dark Flames. He was onto it, and he actually managed to react to it before I was really able to punish him hard for keeping those tacks in the garrison. So we do see the Power Fist from David. We also see the Dreadnought. And so let's see, what am I doing right here? I'm getting Robes of Torment. Now, each one of the purchases I'm making... Oh, and I lost a squad of heretics right there. Didn't even realize it at the time, I think. But each one of the purchases I'm making at the moment are very purposeful. I'm getting the Robes of Torment because I need to be able to stop the Force Commander. I don't have any other War Gears on my Sorcerer because nothing is as important as getting those Chains of Torment right now, because I need to be able to stop the Force Commander. Because if he can get a Flesh over Steel on the Dreadnought, and he can get some follow-up from the Missile Attack or his regular Dreadnought, that could take out my Dreadnought, and it could be the GG in his favor right then and there, even with my VP lead. I also got the Mark of Khorne for my Chaos Dreadnought, which is also a very purposeful upgrade. That allows my Dreadnought to be able to go toe-to-toe with his Dreadnought. It would have an advantage when Blood Rage is active, and it also gives me a little bit more survivability if I do get hit by Flesh over Steel. Now I have a Havoc. The Havoc, again, I need that. I need the extra AV damage against the Dreadnought. I need the Snare, and I just need the extra damage. And now, of course, the Havoc is pretty easily forced off, especially if he had a Teleporter pack, or if he had Assault Marines, he would be able to very easily force off the Havoc. But part of what I'm doing here, I need to be able to be ready to use those Chains of Torment to save the Havoc from getting hit by the Force Commander. And I activate Blood Rage immediately. Part of the reason I activate Blood Rage is because Blood Rage gives a damage resistance. So even if he hits me with Flesh over Steel, my Dreadnought becomes a lot more likely to survive, because even though its weapons will be disabled, it'll still have the damage resistance. And here we go with a teleported Havoc. Unfortunately, my firing arc was all wrong, so I did not have a chance to finish off that Dreadnought. But overall, I won that engagement, and won it pretty well. Unfortunately, one of the things that I think occurred for David, not in his favor, is that I think he maybe ran out of energy to use Flesh over Steel, because he was using energy from the Iron Halo, and that's one of the disadvantages to going with this particular loadout. Need to manage your energy, make sure that you don't use too much energy from the Iron Halo, and then don't have enough energy for the other abilities that you need, such as Flesh over Steel. Now, I did manage to take out a Scout on retreat. A lot of models dying right here. Things now looking pretty strongly in my favor, and I'm using my Havoc to bash generators. That's really just the most productive thing it can do until his Dreadnought comes back out on the field. His Dreadnought needs repairs, and he lost a Scout Squad, so he's actually now not in a very strong position. He lost one Scout Squad, so he only has one repair unit on a vehicle that has a lot of hit points. I even have a triple cap with most of the map in my favor. And I'm going to Tier 3, so I'm in a pretty strong position, but I'm not... One of the things I'm doing right now, although you obviously can't tell it from watching the replay, but I can remember my state of mind at the time, and part of what I'm doing is I'm not resting easy, even with the significant lead that I have. And again, a lot of the upgrades I'm getting are very purposeful. I'm getting the Rod of Warpfire specifically so that I can use the Warpfire ability to disrupt the Tactical Marines. Because the Tactical Marines disrupted means they're more likely to retreat. It means it'll be time when they won't be able to fire their missile launcher to do damage to my Dreadnought. Now, Chains of Torment right there against a lone Force Commander to focus him down, and now he's not really going to be able to use the Force Commander in an engagement, won't be able to use Flesh over Steel. So VP's actually evened out now at 342 to 100, and I have upgraded Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines. I have Eternal War and the Tzeentch upgrade, but no Aspiring Champion. Now there I used the Warpfire again. Well, not again. I used it, and it works pretty well, and then the Sorcerer just closes in for melee. Ooh, that is a really painful smite, but luckily it didn't kill any of the Chaos Space Marine models. Meanwhile, I see this Chaos Dreadnought now closing in, and I do have the Las Cannon infiltrated, but he was able to move in the Librarian. So now I'm actually in a bit of trouble, but it looks like I am going to take out his Dreadnought. I take out his Dreadnought. Force Commander is still here. Finally uses Flesh over Steel, and he does have For the Emperor active on his Tactical Marines. I think that would actually be better used against the Force Commander, since the Force Commander will do much, much more damage than the Tactical Marines against the Dreadnought. And I use the Warp Global right there to get my Dreadnought out of trouble. That is, of course, a very common tactic with the Khorne Dreadnought specifically, as well as really with any unit that might be in trouble and in danger of dying. It gives you a get-out-of-jail-free card, and it's something that I really used it, again, purposely in this matchup because of the risk that is faced by having to deal with a Power Fist Force Commander. So now I'm again in a pretty strong position. 2-to-1 VPs for David, however, I'm with a significant lead in countable VPs in the bank, 320 to 80. And I just had a pretty good engagement win, so I'm moving back out, but we do see some backcapping by David. He's unfortunately lost quite a few units. Lost scouts, lost a Dreadnought, Librarian is back here. So I'm spreading out, and of course my Havoc goes right to capping duty, because there is no longer a vehicle to deal with. Unfortunately, the Force Commander is going to do a lot of damage, takes out one model right there. Power Fist is so powerful, not just for the damage it does to vehicles, but also because it does so much damage in a single swing that it kills models very, very easily. Even if not especially, the models on these squads like Chaos Space Marines, Tactical Marines, 1 or 2 hits, well, probably more like 2 hits, will kill a single model on these squads. And of course, these are expensive models, so like right here, I'm retreating immediately, and if the Force Commander, he does not decide to go for a Chaos Space Marine model, but like if he had just attacked those Chaos Space Marines, even one swing could have taken out a Chaos Space Marine model. Now, unfortunately, there it looks like I lost track of my Sorcerer and retreated him just too late. We do have some Veil of Time on the Devastators, and this could actually be it for my Dreadnought. Veil of Time, yeah, Veil of Time, very nicely used, as well as for the Emperor. Better used on the Las Cannon Havoc than on the Missile Attack. Because if you think about it, for the Emperor is a 25% damage buff. So Devastator Marines doing about 33 DPS compared to up to 17 of the Missile Attack. So it's really best to use a buff like that on really the most powerful unit that you have. Now, here, what's going on here is part of why I'm not resting easy. Even though there were times when I had such a significant advantage, I did finally lose my Dreadnought. I lost it pretty legitimately, and up until this Great Unclean One comes out, I'm actually in a really disadvantageous position right now compositionally. Now, the Great Unclean One coming out is definitely going to improve things in my favor, but without that Great Unclean One, just with my current composition, I would actually really struggle with what I would have to deal with against David, and that can definitely be part of just what can be difficult sometimes. Even though if I lose something like that Dreadnought, I can even with a lot of wins, I can still be in a losing position, even with such a lead in VPs. So I have it's a 1-to-1 now. Predator now out for David. Now, and again, this is still really anyone's game, even with the significant VP lead in my favor. I only have the Mark of Tzeentch Havoc to deal with that Predator. And I need to be extremely careful about things that are going to be able to deal with that Mark of Tzeentch Havoc. I have a Librarian that could smite it and take away most of its hit points. If a Force Commander gets in range, he really doesn't stand any chance. Alright. But even the Tactical Marines could shoot it down pretty quickly. And I moved the Great Unclean One in. I'm a big fan of the Great Unclean One, but I just lost a lot of health with the Great Unclean One, so that was not particularly great use of it there. I think the Great Unclean One personally is a fantastic unit, and I personally think it is the choice, pretty much the choice tier. At first I was gonna say the choice super unit purchase in certain matchups, but if anything, I would almost say the choice tier 3 purchase in certain matchups, and specifically the tanky melee hero matchups, because the Great Unclean One is both the least vulnerable to those tanky melee heroes, while at the same time countering them the hardest. Alright, but I force off the las cannon right there using the Bloodletter Summoning Circle, as well as scaring off the Librarian with the Great Unclean One. And now typically the Sorcerer struggles a lot against single entities, and the tougher they are, typically the more he struggles against them, especially if they are melee single entities. The Great Unclean One is actually one of the best single entity counters that the Space Marines have. And what I'm doing here, without actually destroying anything, I managed to force my opponent off the field. I removed the las cannon with the Bloodletter Summoning, I removed the Librarian with the Great Unclean One, and I scared off the Predator with the las cannon. So, Chains of Torment right here, unfortunately not a great chains because they were easily shot down, and I was hoping to keep my Havocs infiltrated and a secret right here, but he's on to me, he found them. So I'm moving them, keeping my infiltration, but I'm not going to be able to hold on to the infiltration much longer with the Assault Terminators right here hammering apart my Heretics, so I'm going to lose the Heretic squad. But the Great Unclean One is all up in it, trying to take out the Devastators, forcing off a lot of things, and I'm actually losing units. However, the Tactical Marines right here just might get wiped on retreat. Can I finish them off? I missed the opportunity. I don't remember if I do a Dark Flames right here. I probably judged it as not being worth it. And I'm not even sure if I had the red. Okay, I did have the red. But meanwhile, other things are going on with Heretics maybe attempted a decap, and I have my own Predator. Didn't even realize I had my own Predator. But my own Predator is now in a pretty strong situation. Or is it? I thought it was. Because my Predator is getting chased by Terminators, so it's not shooting at his Predator. And his Predator is kiting my Great Unclean One. So things are actually going pretty well here. For David, actually. He's actually about to get a double cap, so I'm going to move over the Chaos Space Marines, and luckily they're still going to counter scouts in the late game, if not even better. Ooh, missed David's Predator going down, and I actually don't have that many units. And I teleport the Great Unclean One out again. And again, part of what I think is good about that Great Unclean One is because of how tough he is, how much he can stay out on the field. I mean, if you notice just how much I kept the Great Unclean One walking around chasing things, and that just kept things busy and kept up a lot of pressure. Now it's going to be actually a double cap in favor of me, although we have a Librarian running over to the victory point. And this game, even though I have a significant VP lead, in many ways it's actually a very, very close game. Now I have a double cap. David's about to even it out at a 1-to-1. I think, however, at this point, I should be able to hold. Actually, this is part of what I was worried about. I was worried about with my current composition, I'm going to have trouble capturing and basically getting a full capture on this point. So I send the Heretics in first to at least get the decap, and concerned that they might die, managed to keep my Predator alive by disrupting the Devastator Marines. And I guess one of the things I also knew I had to do is that I had to move out my Great Unclean One, even with just very, very little health. And this engagement is managing to go in this favor. Attacks go down. Where are all these units coming from? He has so many units, though. And I do manage to get a double cap and finish off the game. So even though I had a significant VP lead, I would actually say that was a very close game and much closer than it looked. in terms of VPs, and part of the reason I know this is because I've played many games like this before where I had this kind of VP lead and I lost the game. And usually I didn't even lose the game because all the VPs drained down. I just lost the game just because on engagements the Force Commander player was able to be resilient enough and keep putting out units that he was able to actually just really get to a point where I no longer had any more staying power. This time I managed to close it out. Again, just stayed disciplined, and I never rested easy at any point in this game, really just kept up the pressure the whole time. Alright, so that was a 1v1 cast. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night.